My name is Christy, and I am 32 years old. For 2 long years, I had been living back in my childhood home, carrying the weight of my family's entire household on my shoulders. I was the one paying the bills, covering the mortgage, keeping the lights on, and making sure there was food in the fridge. Yet despite everything I gave, I was never treated as anything more than a burden, an inconvenience who just happened to come with a working bank account. And then, one night, everything snapped. It started like so many of our family arguments did, loud, cruel, and one-sided. My mother, Margaret, was in rare form, her voice sharp and cutting as she tore into me about something trivial. Maybe it was the way I folded the laundry, maybe it was how I loaded the dishwasher. It didn't matter. With her, the details never mattered. What mattered was reminding me of my place in that house, unwanted, yet expected to provide. But this time, instead of another lecture that would slowly grind me down into silence, she went for the final blow. "Pack your things and get out," she screamed, her face twisted with anger. The words echoed in my chest like a hammer striking metal. For years, I had been told to be grateful for the roof over my head. For years, I had swallowed her insults because I believed I had no choice. For years, I had sacrificed my own well-being to keep her household afloat. And now she was ordering me to leave as if I had contributed nothing at all. Something inside me shifted in that moment. I realized she wasn't bluffing to scare me into compliance, or maybe she was, but for the first time in my life, I didn't care. Instead of pleading, instead of backing down, I decided to take her at her word. Fine. I would pack my things. But before I walked out that door, I was going to do something I should have done long ago. Something that would remind her that I wasn't just it. To the daughter she could manipulate, I was also the person who had been single-handedly funding her life. One by one, I opened my laptop, logged into my accounts, and canceled every single autopay I had set up for their bills. The mortgage, the electricity, the water, the gas, the internet, even the cell phones. In minutes, I erased the safety net they had built on my back. If they wanted to treat me like an ATM, they were about to find out what life looked like when the machine ran out of cash. As I zipped up my suitcase, a strange calm washed over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was the one making the choice, not them. I wasn't leaving because my mother had shouted at me. I was leaving because I finally understood my worth. And with that, I picked up my bags, walked out the door, and stepped into a new chapter of my life. To understand why my mother's words cut so deeply, you need to know where I came from. My story didn't begin the night she shouted at me to pack my things. It began decades earlier when I was a child, learning that in my family, love was conditional, and I was always the one who fell short. My mother, Margaret, was the kind of woman who wanted everything to look perfect on the outside. She cared about appearances, about what neighbors thought, about how people at church admired our put-together family, but behind closed doors, the pressure was suffocating. Her standards were impossibly high, and they were never applied evenly. When I was young, nothing I did was ever enough. If my grades were good, they should have been better. If my room was tidy, she would still find a wrinkle in the bedspread or a streak on the window and point it out with disappointment. Every achievement of mine was brushed off as the bare minimum, while my failures were magnified and compared to the one person she never let me forget. My father. "You're just like him," she would hiss whenever she was angry, as if my father's abandonment when I was 10 had somehow been my fault. He had walked out without warning, without child support, without even a note. But instead of her anger falling on him, it landed squarely on me, the easiest target left behind. When Harold, my stepfather, entered the picture, I had foolishly hoped things would change. He was quiet at first, polite even. But it didn't take long before he found his role, not as a father figure to me, but as Margaret's enforcer. Where she criticized, he backed her up. Where she set impossible rules, he made sure they were enforced. And whatever love or patience he might have had was reserved for someone else entirely, my half-sister, Vanessa. Vanessa was the golden child, the star who could do no wrong. The contrast between us was brutal. She brought home a C on a report card. They celebrated her hard work. I brought home straight A's. That was expected, nothing more. Vanessa's 16th birthday came with a shiny new car. Mine came with driving lessons and the reminder that if I wanted wheels, I'd better find a way to buy them myself. It wasn't Vanessa's fault she was treated like royalty while I was treated like the hired help, but the favoritism left a canyon between us that never closed. She grew up believing she was special. I grew up believing I was defective. By the time I turned 18, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my bags and left for college, desperate for a life where I could finally breathe. With scholarships, loans, and 3 part-time jobs, I clawed my way through a marketing degree. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. For the first time, I felt the freedom of living without constant criticism. I built myself up, brick by brick, without anyone's help. But even after I created a life of my own, the damage lingered. Every phone call would tick. My mother felt like a test. Every family dinner was a reminder that I would never measure up to the daughter she actually wanted. My achievements, my independence, my career, they never seemed to matter. What mattered was that I wasn't Vanessa. Looking back now, I can see the pattern so clearly. My mother needed someone to blame for her disappointments, and I was convenient. Harold needed someone to enforce his authority on, and I was the outsider. Vanessa needed someone to shoulder responsibility so she could stay carefree, and I was the obvious choice. I was the scapegoat, carrying everyone else's frustrations while my own needs went ignored. That childhood set the stage for everything that came later. It made me resilient, yes, but it also made me vulnerable to the trap I fell into as an adult. When I lost my job at 30 and found myself desperate enough to call home, I believed, naively, that this time would be different. That maybe my family would finally support me the way I had supported myself all those years. But if you've grown up being the scapegoat, you learn the hard way. Coming back only puts you right back into the role they assigned you long ago. And this time, stepping back into that house came with a new kind of leash, financial dependence that soon flipped into financial control. After I left home at 18, I swore I would never go back. Those first years on my own were grueling. I juggled 3 part-time jobs while studying, often sleeping only a few hours a night. But despite the exhaustion, I felt alive in a way I never had under my mother's roof. Every accomplishment, no matter how small, belonged entirely to me. By 28, I had built the kind of life I could be proud of. I worked in digital marketing at a respected firm. My apartment was small, but it was comfortable and completely mine. I had friends, professional connections, and the faroshu. Edom to live without someone looking over my shoulder and pointing out every flaw. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. For the first time, I thought I had outrun my family's shadow. Then everything unraveled. The company I worked for went through a massive restructuring. Entire departments were cut overnight, including mine. I remember sitting in that sterile conference room with HR, listening to them explain severance packages as if a few weeks of pay could make up for the years of stability I had just lost. I told myself I'd bounce back quickly. After all, I had experience, a strong resume, and a portfolio of campaigns that had delivered real results. But the market was flooded with talent. Every job posting had hundreds of applicants. I sent out resume after resume, went on interviews, and heard the same polite rejection over and over again. We were impressed, but we've decided to move forward with another candidate. The weeks dragged into months. My emergency savings dwindled faster than I ever imagined. Rent in the city was brutal, and no matter how carefully I budgeted, my account balance kept sliding lower and lower. I applied for everything, jobs I was overqualified for, jobs I had no business doing, but nothing stuck. When I sold my car just to keep up with bills, the reality hit me. I was running out of options. I tried to stay optimistic, but the stress was crushing. Every day, I woke up with a pit in my stomach, wondering how much longer I could hold out before I had to face the thing I feared most, calling home. That phone call was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I still remember how my hands shook as I dialed. "Mom," I said, swallowing my pride, "I need to come home for a while just until I find another job." The silence on the line stretched long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. Finally, she said, "Well, I suppose we have the space, but you'll need to contribute. We're not running a charity." Even in that moment, even when I was humbling myself to ask for help, she had to remind me that I would never stay there for free. I told myself it would only be temporary, a month, maybe 2 at most. Just long enough to catch my breath, save a little money, and get back on my feet. I packed 2 suitcases, a box of professional awards that suddenly felt hollow, and moved back into the house I had once fought so hard to escape. When I walked through that front door at 30 years old, I didn't realize I was stepping into a trap. I thought I was coming back to a family safety net, but what I really walked into was a setup that would drain me financially, emotionally, and mentally for the next 2 years. I had survived being the scapegoat child. I had built independence against the odds, but now, with my career gone and my savings nearly wiped out, I was about to learn how quickly old family dynamics can swallow you whole, and how hard it is to escape once you let them pull you back in. Walking back into my childhood home at 30 felt surreal. I told myself it was temporary, a few weeks at most, but the moment I set my bags down, I noticed things were not as I remembered. Bills were piled high on the kitchen counter, many stamped with "final notice." The fridge was half empty, repairs around the house had been ignored, and the atmosphere felt heavy with unspoken stress. That first night, I cautiously asked about the overdue bills. My mother stiffened, my stepfather avoided eye contact, and my sister Vanessa rolled her eyes. We've had some setbacks, my mom admitted, but we're managing. Later, I would learn those setbacks were things like cosmetic dental work for Vanessa and a vacation disguised as a mental health retreat for my mother. But at the time, all I saw was their distress, and the old habit of trying to fix everything kicked in. I still have a little savings left, I said. I can help with the bills until I find work. The relief on their faces was instant. They didn't say thanked. Not really, but they didn't protest either. Harold muttered, that would be helpful. My mom quickly added, just until you find a job, Christy, we don't need you to support us. But that's exactly what ended up happening. I set up autopay from my account to cover the utilities, the mortgage, and the household expenses. At first, I thought of it as a stopgap, something to keep us all afloat while I searched for steady work. But the job market was brutal. Freelance projects trickled in here and there, but nothing substantial enough to replace a salary. And while I scrambled to find stability, the bills kept rolling in and the withdrawals kept draining my account. Within months, I was the one keeping the house running. The mortgage, mine. Electricity, mine. Groceries, mine. Even their cell phone bills were paid from my dwindling savings. Meanwhile, Vanessa worked a full-time job at a boutique but contributed nothing. When I brought it up, my mom waved me off. She works full-time, Christy. She needs her rest. Rest? I was working from dawn till night, sending out job applications, doing freelance gigs, cooking, cleaning, shopping, and maintaining the household, yet every effort I made was dismissed or criticized. Christy, you left streaks on the windows again. Christy, this roast is too dry. Christy, why don't you dress more appropriately if you want to find a husband? Every word was another cut, a reminder that in their eyes, I wasn't a grown woman fighting to rebuild her life. I was still the child who would never measure up. The imbalance was staggering. Vanessa came and went as she pleased, spending her paycheck on clothes, trips with friends, and her car payments. Harold worked fewer hours than ever, shrugging off responsibility with the excuse that times are tough. My mom alternated between demanding gratitude for giving me a roof over my head and shaming me for not having a real job at my age, even as I paid for that very roof. I knew it was toxic, but I felt trapped. Where else could I go? My savings were bleeding dry, rent paid. Ices were impossible, and after so many rejections, my confidence had plummeted. So, I stayed. Day after day, I told myself it was temporary. Week after week, I convinced myself I'd land a job soon and everything would change. Month after month, I endured the criticism, the manipulation, and the unspoken expectation that I would carry everyone on my back. And the worst part, deep down, I think they liked it that way. The night I discovered Harold's credit card statement, my heart sank. There it was, in black and white, charges for a weekend getaway at a resort, jewelry for Vanessa, and dinners out. Meanwhile, I was buying groceries with coupons and watching my savings vanish. When I confronted my mom, she shrugged. We deserve some enjoyment, Christy. Not everything is about paying bills. Her words burned, because for me, everything was about paying bills. I was drowning so they could float. What made it even worse was the silence. No matter how much I did, no matter how much I gave, I was invisible. At family dinners, my achievements went unacknowledged, while Vanessa's every small success was celebrated. When I got interviews, they doubted me. When I cooked meals, they criticized. When I struggled, they dismissed me. 2 years slipped by that way. What was supposed to be temporary turned into something permanent, a cycle I didn't know how to break. The girl who had once fought her way to independence was now stuck again, this time not just emotionally but financially shackled to a family that saw me as a resource, not a daughter. Looking back, I realized that was the point. They didn't want me to succeed because my success meant freedom, and freedom for me meant the loss of their meal ticket. I was back home, but I wasn't part of the family. I was the bank, the maid, the scapegoat, all rolled into one. And every day, the chains grew heavier. The slow grind of those 2 years wore me down, but the breaking point didn't come from one big fight. It came from a series of betrayals, each one cutting deeper than the last until there was nothing left to lose. The first crack appeared one evening when I overheard a conversation I was never supposed to hear. I'd made a special dinner, pot roast, roasted potatoes, even a lemon meringue pie, because earlier that day I had received a job offer. It wasn't perfect, but it was steady, and more importantly, it was my way out. I sat at the table with a small smile, waiting for at least a flicker of happiness from my family. Instead, my announcement was brushed aside, overshadowed instantly by Vanessa's promotion at the boutique where she worked. As my words faded into silence, theirs grew louder, celebrating her as if she had become CEO of a major company. I swallowed my disappointment and quietly began washing dishes as they moved to the living room. And that's when I heard it. "What are we going to do about Christy's job?" Harold asked in a low voice. "What do you mean?" my mother replied. "If she starts working, she'll want to move out. Who's going to pay the bills then?" There was a pause before my mom answered, her voice sharper, colder than ever. "We'll just have to make sure she stays longer. The job is entry-level anyway. She'll still need us." "And our support means her money," Harold chuckled. "We've gotten used to not worrying about the mortgage," Margaret agreed. "She owes us, after all we've done for her." I froze, hands submerged in soapy water, my chest tightening with each word. Vanessa chimed in from the couch. "Guilt works. Tell her how much you depend on her around the house. She'll stay." Then came the knife that cut deepest, my mother's laugh. "Christy has always been easy to manipulate. She's so desperate for approval. She'll do anything if she thinks it'll make us love her." The words echoed in my head, louder than any shout she had ever thrown at me. They didn't just take me for granted. They saw me as a tool, a resource, a thing to be used until I had nothing left. Still, I tried to push through. The next morning, I woke up determined to prove them wrong by holding on to that job offer. But when I checked my email, my heart sank. An email had been sent from my account at 1 a.m. "After careful consideration, I must decline your job offer. Thank you for your time. Someone had hacked my account. Someone had sabotaged me." I stormed into Vanessa's room, and she didn't even bother to deny it. "Mom said it was for the best. You were going to abandon us." Her words lit something inside me, a fire I had spent years suppressing. "Abandon you? I've been paying for everything for 2 years." She shrugged, indifferent. "Mom said you owe us." I went straight to my mother, shaking with rage. "You sabotaged my job. You had Vanessa decline my offer." Margaret turned to face me, calm, collected. "I did what was best for this family. You weren't thinking clearly." "Best for this family or best for your bank account?" That was when the dam broke. Years of anger, disappointment, and betrayal spilled out of me in a torrent. I told them how much money I had poured into their house, over $45,000 in just 2 years. I told them how I had sacrificed my future while they criticized me and celebrated Vanessa. I told them how I had heard every word of their plan to keep me trapped, how they laughed about manipulating me like I was nothing more than a puppet. The room exploded into chaos. My mom shouted about giving me a roof over my head. Harold tried to dismiss me as dramatic. Vanessa sneered that I was just jealous because they loved her more. And the worst part, none of them denied what I said. Not once. It was all true. Every accusation, every betrayal. And when I finally said, "If you don't want me here, I'll go," my mother didn't back down this time. She shouted it again, even louder than before. "Then pack your things and leave," she expected me to crumble, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness like I always had. But instead, something inside me shifted. Her words didn't feel like punishment anymore. They felt like permission. Fine, I would pack my things. But before I left, I was going to take back the one thing they had stolen from me, my power. For so long, my mother's words, "Hacking she oms asom," pack your things and leave, she had been a threat, a warning meant to keep me small, dependent, and obedient, but this time something inside me had broken free. I wasn't going to shrink, I wasn't going to beg, I was going to do exactly what she demanded, and more. I walked to my room with steady steps, my heart pounding, but my resolve clear. From under the bed, I dragged out the same 2 suitcases I had carried back into this house 2 years ago. Back then, they were filled with hope that my family would be a safety net. Now they were going to carry away the last pieces of me that I had left behind. As I folded clothes into my bag, I could hear the shuffle of footsteps behind me. My mother appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression shifting between anger and panic. "Christy, stop this nonsense. You're overreacting." I didn't answer. I kept packing. Her voice rose. "What about the bills? The mortgage is due next week. You can't just walk out." And there it was. Not concern for me, not regret, not even an apology, just fear about losing the money I provided. I turned to her, my voice steady. "I'm sure you'll figure it out. That's what adults do, right?" Her face paled at my words, an echo of the very phrase she had thrown at me when I pleaded to borrow her car for an interview. I saw the realization flicker across her eyes. She no longer had the leverage she once did. For the next hour, I packed while they hovered. Harold tried to reason with me, saying I was being dramatic. Vanessa mocked me under her breath, muttering about how I wouldn't survive without them. My mom oscillated between guilt trips and outright demands, but none of it worked, not this time. When I zipped up the last suitcase, I pulled out my laptop and opened my bank account. Their voices fell silent as they watched me click through my autopay settings. One by one, I canceled everything. The mortgage, the electricity, the water, the gas, the internet, the cell phones, every single automatic payment that had kept their lives afloat while they drained me dry. Click, canceled, click, canceled, click, canceled. Harold's face went pale. What did you just do? I looked up at him, calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. I canceled the payments. I won't be living here anymore, so I won't be paying for this house anymore. You can't do that, my mother screeched. We depend on those payments. I closed the laptop and slipped it into my bag. You should have thought of that before you decided I was more valuable as an ATM than as a daughter. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. For once, none of them had a comeback. They had spent years perfecting the art of making me feel small, but now the balance had shifted. I wasn't powerless anymore. I hauled my bags to the front door. No one offered to help me. No one even tried to stop me. They just stood there, stunned, as if they never believed I would actually walk out. At the door, I turned one last time to face them. My voice was quiet but firm. I hope someday you realize what you've done. Not just to me, but to yourselves. Family should be about love and support, not exploitation. My mom tried to recover her composure. You'll be back, she said, though her voice lacked conviction, when you realize how hard it is out there on your own. I gave a small, sad smile. I've been on my own for years, Mom, even when I was living under your roof. And with that, I opened the door, stepped outside, and walked into the Uber I had called. As the car pulled away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine. No ma'am. Or chains. No more manipulation, no more sacrificing myself to keep others comfortable. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. And as the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, I made a silent promise. Never again would I allow anyone, family or otherwise, to treat me as less than I was worth. The first few days after I left felt like stepping into sunlight after years in a dark cave. Disorienting, yes, but freeing. I stayed with my friend Sarah, who welcomed me with open arms and a pull-out couch. She didn't judge, didn't lecture, didn't demand. She just listened as I poured out 2 years of frustration, betrayal, and exhaustion. For the first time, someone called it what it was: financial abuse. Hearing that word out loud gave me validation I didn't know I needed. Meanwhile, back at the house, the walls were starting to crack. The calls began on the 7th day. My phone lit up with my mother's number. When I answered, her voice was tight with anger. Christy, the water's been shut off. We have no running water. This is your fault. You need to fix this immediately. I took a deep breath, my resolve steady. No, Mom, it's not my responsibility anymore. I don't live there. Her outrage was palpable. You can't just leave us like this. We don't have the money right now. You need to transfer it over. I stayed calm. Then maybe Vanessa can contribute. She has a full-time job, or Harold can pick up more hours. You'll figure it out. That's what adults do, right? Click. She hung up. Over the next 2 weeks, the calls came in waves, sometimes angry, sometimes desperate, sometimes laced with guilt. The electricity was cut off, then the internet, then the credit card companies started calling. Each time, they blamed me. Each time, I refused to give in. You're killing your mother with stress, Harold snapped in one voicemail. Hope you're happy now that we're suffering, Margaret texted late one night. Don't expect us to forgive you for abandoning us, Vanessa added coldly. But underneath their reets and accusations, I could hear something else: panic. For years, they had relied on me as their safety net. Now, they were free-falling, and they had no idea how to catch themselves. And when blaming me wasn't enough, they turned to the extended family. Within days, I started getting calls from aunts, uncles, and cousins who had heard my mother's version of the story. According to her, I had lived rent-free for 2 years and then abandoned them without warning, leaving them in a terrible financial situation. At first, I felt the familiar wave of shame, but this time I didn't cave. I calmly explained the truth, that I had paid their mortgage, utilities, groceries, and phone bills for 2 years, that I had sacrificed my savings and my future while being treated like an unwelcome guest. that they had sabotaged job opportunities to keep me trapped. Some relatives were shocked, others skeptical, but the more I spoke, the more I realized I wasn't alone. My Aunt Susan admitted she had noticed my mother's manipulative streak years ago. My Uncle Robert confessed that Margaret had twisted situations before to make herself the victim. Piece by piece, their carefully crafted story began to crumble. Finally, exhausted from repeating myself, I wrote a detailed email to the entire extended family. I attached screenshots of my bank statements showing the autopays. I even included the email Vanessa had sent declining my job offer without my consent. And I ended with this: I did not abandon my family. I removed myself from an abusive situation after exhausting every other option. I wish them well, but I will no longer set myself on fire to keep them warm. When I hit send, I braced for backlash. Instead, my inbox filled with messages of support. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out to say they believed me. Some apologized for ever doubting me. Even Harold's sister, Elle. Inda called and revealed they had done the exact same thing to her decades earlier, moved in, drained her finances, and then smeared her reputation when she finally told them to leave. For the first time, the truth wasn't mine alone to carry. Other people finally saw what I had endured. Meanwhile, the situation at the house worsened. With the utilities cut, Vanessa eventually moved out to live with a friend. My parents began selling belongings online to scrape together cash. They called less and less, their confidence eroded by the reality they could no longer deny. Did I feel guilty? A little, but it was drowned out by something stronger: relief. For the first time in years, their chaos wasn't my problem to solve. The fallout was painful, messy, and loud, but in the silence that followed, I found something I hadn't had in years: peace. I thought the story ended the night I walked out. I thought canceling the autopays and cutting off contact was the final chapter. But life has a way of surprising you, sometimes in ways you'd never dare imagine. It happened on a rainy Saturday afternoon, 2 months after I left. I was settling into a rhythm at my new job, slowly piecing my independence back together, when there was a knock at the door of my tiny studio apartment. I wasn't expecting visitors, and Sarah was out of town. Peering through the peephole, my breath caught in my throat. It was them. My mother. My stepfather. Vanessa. All three stood in the hallway, looking nothing like the people I had left behind. Margaret's hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled. Harold looked thinner, dark circles carved beneath his eyes. Even Vanessa seemed subdued, her usual confidence replaced with unease. For a moment, I considered not answering, but curiosity and a strange sense of calm won out. I opened the door. "May we come in?" my mother asked, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. I hesitated, then stepped aside. They perched awkwardly on the futon and single chair I owned, looking around my modest space. The silence stretched until Harold finally spoke. "You're gonna lose the house," he said quietly. "The bank is foreclosing. We have nowhere to go." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry to hear that. Have you tried assistance programs or negotiating with the bank?" "We tried," Margaret admitted, her voice cracking. "But we're too far behind. No one will lend to us anymore." "What about your jobs, I asked. "Vanessa's promotion, Harold's hours." Vanessa stared at her hands. "I lost my job. The boutique closed." Harold added, "My hours were cut again. It's not enough." I braced myself because I knew what was coming. And sure enough, Margaret said the words I had expected since I opened the door. "We thought maybe we could stay here with you, just until we get back on our feet." The irony hit me like a wave. 2 years ago, I had said almost the exact same thing when I asked to come home. Now, she was the one asking. I shook my head slowly. There isn't room here. And more importantly, living together wouldn't be healthy for any of us. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "So you're just going to let us be homeless?" "Mom, I said firmly. "I lived with you for 2 years. During that time, I paid your mortgage, your bills, your groceries. I did the housework, and in return, I was criticized, manipulated, and sabotaged. What exactly did you do for me that I should feel indebted now?" The words hung heavy. No one spoke until, surprisingly, Vanessa broke the silence. "She's right," she said quietly. "We treated Christy terribly. We used her." Margaret's head snapped toward her younger daughter. "Vanessa!" But Vanessa shook her head. "It's true. I let it happen because it benefited me, but it was wrong." Her admission left me momentarily speechless. I had expected defiance, maybe another insult. Instead, she gave me honesty. Then Harold cleared his throat. Christy, I owe you an apology. We all do. You were right about everything. We convinced ourselves it was justified because you were living in our house, but the truth is, you were the one keeping that house afloat, and we treated you like a burden. I had replayed confrontations with my family 1,000 times in my mind, but never like this. Never with them sitting in my apartment admitting fault. My mother's tears slipped on down her cheeks as she whispered, I lost sight of what mattered. I lost sight of you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I am sorry. For so long, I had craved her acknowledgement, her approval, her love. Now that it was finally in front of me, I realized it mattered less than I thought. What mattered more was that I had changed. I appreciate the apologies, I said carefully. But you need to understand, I can't start paying your bills again. And you can't live here. What I can do is help you come up with a plan, but only if you're honest with me. And only if you respect my boundaries. They nodded, humbled in a way I'd never seen before. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Sitting at that tiny kitchen table with my family, I realized something had shifted forever. For years, I had been the one begging for scraps of approval, desperate to prove my worth. But now, for the first time, the power dynamic was reversed. They were asking me for help, and I had the choice, the power, to say yes, no, or something in between. I wasn't naive. Apologies are easy. Change is hard. I had seen enough of their patterns to know that words alone couldn't erase the damage they had caused. So if I was going to help, it would be on my terms, not theirs. I'll help you, I said slowly, but not the way I did before. I won't be your provider. I'll be a consultant. That means I can guide you, but I won't carry you. They exchanged nervous glances, but nodded. First condition, I continued, complete honesty. No hidden expenses, no secret debts, no lies about what money is really being spent on. If you want my help, I need the full picture. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line, but she gave a small nod. Second, everyone participates. That means applying for jobs, cutting unnecessary expenses, maybe selling the house before foreclosure to salvage what you can. No more excuses, no more expecting someone else to fix everything. Harold cleared his throat. That's fair. Third, boundaries, I said firmly. I'll help you with advice and planning, but I won't give you money. I won't move you into my home. And if you start slipping back into criticism or manipulation, I'll walk away. No second chances. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Harold nodded. Those are more than fair, Christy. Thank you. Margaret wiped her eyes, her voice shaky. We'll do whatever it takes. Even Vanessa surprisingly agreed. It's time we take responsibility. So we began. I pulled out a notebook and helped them draft a simple plan. Margaret would apply for retail or administrative jobs even if they paid less than she wanted. Harold would pick up evening or weekend work. Vanessa, now unemployed, would look for a roommate situation to cut costs while applying for new positions. Together we discussed contacting the bank about a short sale rather than waiting for foreclosure. It was strange, almost surreal, me, the daughter who had been ridiculed as irresponsible and incapable, now guiding the very people who had once looked down on me. But I wasn't smug and I wasn't vengeful. I was calm, focused, and clear about where I stood. When they left that afternoon, they were subdued but grateful. Vanessa lingered at the door. I really am sorry, Christy, for everything, especially for sabotaging your job offer. That was unforgivable. I studied her face, and for the first time, I didn't see the golden child who had everything handed to her. I saw someone shaped by the same dysfunctional environment, someone who had chosen selfishness because it was easier. We all make mistakes, I told her. I told her quietly. What matters is what we do now. When the door closed behind them, I sat alone in my apartment processing the whirlwind of emotions. Their apologies might have been sincere, or they might have been born from desperation, only time would tell. But what mattered most was this: I had drawn the line. I had taken back control, and whether or not they changed, I knew I already had. The weeks that followed felt like learning how to breathe again. For so long, I had lived in a fog of criticism, obligation, and fear of disappointing people who never truly saw me. Now every small decision felt like an act of freedom. Buying groceries for just myself, choosing my own meals without judgment, waking up in an apartment where no one inspected the way I folded the sheets or washed the dishes. It wasn't glamorous. My studio was tiny, my bed was still Sarah's pull-out couch, and my budget was razor thin. But it was mine, or at least it felt like mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't bleeding myself dry to support others. I was building something for myself piece by piece. Within a week of cutting ties, I landed a position at a small marketing agency. The salary was modest, but it represented stability. More importantly, it represented independence. Walking into that office on my first day, I felt nervous but also proud. These people didn't know me as the scapegoat child or the reluctant family provider. They knew me as Christy, the marketing professional with a portfolio of work that spoke for itself. And the work went well. My confidence, which had been chipped away for years, began to rebuild. Every completed project, every positive note from my supervisor, every paycheck deposited into my own account without a line item for my family's bills, it all felt like reclaiming pieces of myself I thought I had lost forever. 2 months later, I signed a lease on a small one-bedroom apartment. Modest, yes, but walking across the threshold with my own keys in hand, I nearly cried. No more pull-out couch, no more tiptoeing around someone else's home. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, every choice was mine. The apartment wasn't just a place to live, it was proof that I had broken the cycle. Of course, the scars were still there. Sometimes I'd catch myself bracing for criticism that never came, or feeling guilty for spending $10 on takeout because years of sacrifice had trained me to equate self-care with selfishness. Therapy helped me unravel those knots. My therapist reminded me that healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about integrating it. Those years of struggle had shaped me, but they didn't define me. Meanwhile, my family's situation continued to unravel. The house went into foreclosure. Margaret found a receptionist job, Harold picked up weekend shifts at a hardware store, and Vanessa moved into a shared apartment while working at a coffee shop. From what I heard, they were scraping by, but for the first time, they were standing on their own legs instead of mine. And that was enough. Our contact was limited, occasional texts or dinner invitations, but I kept my boundaries firm. No money, no moving back in, no slipping into the old role. When my mother sent me a message one evening that simply said, "I'm proud of you," I felt an unexpected tear slide down my cheek. For years, those words had been the validation I craved. But now, I realized something important. I didn't need them anymore, because my worth wasn't measured in their approval or in how much I gave or in how much I endured. My worth was inherent, unchangeable, and finally completely my own. Looking back now, I see my journey less as a story of loss and more as a story of discovery. When I first returned home at 30, I thought I was seeking refuge. Instead, I found a harsh truth: refuge doesn't. To exist where love is conditional, where support is a mask for exploitation. For 2 years, I carried the financial weight of an entire household, all while being told I wasn't good enough. And yet, as painful as those years were, they became the crucible that forged my strength. Walking away was the hardest decision I ever made. Family ties run deep, and breaking free from them felt like betraying some sacred obligation. But here's what I've learned. Love and obligation are not the same thing. True love doesn't keep score. It doesn't exploit your sacrifices or sabotage your growth. True love lifts you higher. The night my mother told me to pack my things, I thought I was losing everything. In reality, I was gaining everything that mattered: my freedom, my independence, my voice. By canceling those autopays and stepping out the door, I wasn't just cutting off money, I was cutting off years of manipulation, guilt, and self-doubt. It wasn't an easy road. Rebuilding from nothing meant sleeping on a couch, stretching every paycheck, and battling the echoes of my family's words in my head, but with every step forward, I grew stronger. Strong enough to set boundaries, strong enough to hold my ground when they tried to pull me back, strong enough to know my worth without needing their approval. And perhaps the most surprising part of all, by walking away, I gave them a chance to face their own choices. For years, I was their safety net, their excuse to avoid responsibility. Only when I stepped back did they finally begin to take responsibility for themselves. They didn't have me to lean on anymore, so they had to stand up, and they did. Slowly, imperfectly, but they did. Do I forgive them? That's complicated. Forgiveness isn't a door you fling open once, it's a process, one that requires time and trust. What I do know is that I no longer carry their shame on my shoulders. Their mistakes are theirs to own, my life is mine to live. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. Setting boundaries is not selfish. Walking away from people who drain you, even if they're family, is not cruel. It is necessary, it is healthy, it is the only way to make space for relationships built on love, respect, and equality. Your worth is not determined by how much you give, how much you endure, or how hard you try to earn love from people who refuse to give it freely. Your worth is inherent, unchangeable, entirely your own. So if you're listening to this and you find yourself in a similar place, trapped in cycles of guilt, carrying more than your fair share, or sacrificing your dreams just to keep the peace, let my story be a reminder. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to draw the line. And sometimes the bravest, most loving thing you can do is walk away. Because when you walk away from what hurts you, you walk toward what heals you. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make the painful decision to step away from a toxic relationship, even with family? What gave you the strength to finally do it? Share your story in the comments. I know there are others who need to hear it. And if my journey resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need the reminder that they are worth more than the love they have to beg for. Thank you for listening, and remember, no one, not even family, gets to decide your worth. That is yours forever.